My son-in-law pushed me onto the subway tracks with a wicked smile. Just die already. I survived. Then I ruined his life. You're like gum stuck under a shoe, Jasmine. No matter how hard we try, you just won't come off. Jonathan said it with that lazy smirk of his, sitting at my kitchen table like a man who owned the air in the room. The smell of his cologne, mixed with burnt coffee. Sunita stood by the counter, eyes fixed on the floor, her hands twisting the dish towel I embroidered for her wedding. I held my cup of tea and watched the steam fade. It was cold anyway. He leaned back, crossing his legs. We feed you, we house you, we let you breathe our air. What else do you want? A medal? His voice carried that casual cruelty that people like him call honesty. I said nothing. Silence is a sharp knife when you've lived long enough to know how to use it. Sunita didn't defend me. She never does anymore. For a moment, I almost believed I deserved it. Maybe I'd stayed too long in a house that no longer remembered my laughter. But then he looked at me with that wicked grin, and I saw something I hadn't seen before, a man rehearsing for murder. He stood, stretched, and said, "You've got that doctor's appointment today, remember? I'll take you downtown." His tone was smooth, too smooth, like he'd been practicing it in the mirror. I nodded, grateful for any scrap of civility. The tea trembled in my hand, and so did I. When Sunita finally looked up, I caught the flicker of guilt in her eyes. I almost told her I loved her, but the words felt heavy and useless. The only sound that followed was the tick of the old clock, counting down something I couldn't yet name. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. We left the house as the morning fog clung to the trees. The air was cold enough to bite, and the walk to the station was quiet except for his shoes clicking against the pavement. He talked about traffic, about the weather, about nothing that mattered. I nodded when he spoke, pretending not to notice how he never met my eyes. The subway was crowded but not enough to disappear in. People hurried, heads down, each lost in their own noise. I clutched my purse like a child holds a secret. He guided me to the edge of the platform, his hand on my back, a gesture that might have looked kind to anyone watching. "You know," he said softly, almost kindly, "it's funny. You old folks spend your whole life talking about heaven, but you're too scared to go there." He chuckled, that low sound that made my stomach twist. "Jonathan," I whispered, "why are you saying this?" He didn't answer. He looked at me with eyes so calm, it chilled me more than any scream could have. Then he leaned close enough for me to smell the mint on his breath. "Just die already." It was almost tender, the way he said it, like a lover's goodbye. Then came the shove. The scream that followed didn't belong to me, it belonged to the air itself. I remember the flash of light, the iron taste, the roar that swallowed everything. Then hands, rough, urgent, pulling me up. A man's voice shouting, "Hold on, ma'am," before everything went dark again. I remember his sleeve brushing my cheek, the smell of engine oil and smoke. Then nothing. In that instant before darkness took me, I didn't see Jonathan's face. I saw Sunita learning to walk, Mark's laughter in our first home, the Memphis garden I left behind. My life folded like old letters tucked away for safekeeping. I thought it was the end, but it wasn't. I woke between light and pain, reaching for air and finding it warm. I didn't die that day, but the part of me that forgave too easily did. The woman who fell was Jasmine the mother, the one who rose was something else. And Jonathan had no idea what kind of ghost he'd just made. When I opened my eyes, I was surrounded by white. White walls, white sheets, white light that hummed above me like a trapped bee. My body ached in strange places, ribs, hip, shoulder. There was a faint scent of antiseptic and metal. I knew that smell. It was the smell of hospitals, of endings. A nurse leaned over me, smiling the way nurses do when they are trained not to show pity. "You're awake, Mrs. Davis. You took quite a fall," her badge said Clara. I tried to speak, but my voice sounded like someone else's, thin and far away. Where am I?" "Street Mary's Hospital," she said gently. "You're safe now." safe. The word rang hollow. Because if I was here, then Jonathan was somewhere out there, free. A doctor entered with a clipboard, flipping pages as if my life were just paperwork. "You're very lucky, ma'am," he said. "You were found between the tracks. No broken spine, no major bleeding. You'll recover." He hesitated before continuing, but allowed brief visitation under supervision. "It looks like you were pushed, but your son-in-law said you stumbled." I watched his eyes when he said it, hesitant, cautious. He said, "I stumbled?" I repeated slowly. The doctor nodded. "He said you've been unsteady lately, perhaps dizzy." He seemed quite concerned. I almost laughed. Concerned? That man's concern was a mask stitched together with greed. Later that day, Jonathan came in with a bouquet of supermarket lilies, the kind that smell too strong, as if to drown out guilt. Sonita followed, face pale, carrying my old cardigan. Jonathan sat by the bed, his voice dripping with false kindness. "Mom, you scared us. The doctor said you might have fainted. You've got to be more careful, okay?" I watched him talk, the way his jaw clenched each time I met his eyes. He looked at me, like a man standing over a grave that refused to stay closed. "I don't remember much," I whispered. "I fell?" He smiled that same serpent smile. "Yes, you fell, Mom. No one's to blame. You're safe now." Sonita looked ready to cry. For a moment, I thought it was guilt, but no, it was fear. The kind that comes when you realize someone you love is a stranger. I turned my head away, letting my eyes blur. "I'm confused," I murmured, slurring the words just enough. "Everything's fuzzy." He nodded quickly. "That's normal after a shock." That was the moment I decided to become what they wanted, a fragile old woman who couldn't tell memory from dream. Let them think I was harmless. Over the next few days, I listened more than I spoke. I learned that silence draws truth out of liars like a magnet pulls nails. One afternoon, they stepped outside the room to talk. They thought I was asleep. The door wasn't fully closed. I heard Jonathan's voice first. "She's useless. But at least now she can't mess with our plans." Sonita whispered something I couldn't catch. "Our plans?" the nurse asked later, seeing my face tighten. "Are you in pain?" "No," I said, just remembering. The word plans rang inside me like a bell. I remembered the papers he'd made me sign, insurance forms, just in case something ever happens. Sonita had smiled. "It's just routine, Mom." My blood went cold. After that, they visited daily his fake kindness, her silent guilt. I played the fool, asked twice, forgot once. But at night, I remembered everything, the push, the train, his voice. On the fourth night, I heard him whisper, "We'll sell the house once she's gone." When they left, I opened my drawer, touched the blood-stained subway ticket, and smiled. Evidence hides best in plain sight. The next morning, the doctor told me I could go home soon. "You'll need rest," he said. "Your daughter and her husband seem ready to take care of you." "Yes," I whispered. "They always are." When they came to pick me up, I shuffled my steps, clutched Jonathan's arm like a helpless old woman. "Thank you, dear," I said softly. His grip stiffened for just a second. I felt his pulse fast, nervous. In the car, I gazed out the window as the city rolled by, my reflection faint in the glass. My face looked different somehow, not weaker, sharper, calmer. Sonita spoke quietly. "We'll make things easier for you, Mom. Maybe sell the house, move somewhere smaller." I nodded. "Whatever you think is best, dear." Jonathan chuckled. "Now that's the spirit." He didn't notice how my hands rested on my lap, perfectly still, or how my eyes didn't blink as I studied his reflection in the rearview mirror. When we reached home, I walked slowly inside, the smell of the house familiar yet hollow. He helped me sit, turned on the television, and went upstairs. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade, then I whispered into the empty room, "You'll regret leaving me alive." That night, I began to make mental lists of documents, dates, accounts, the insurance number, the day of the so-called fall, every detail catalogued, clean and precise. They thought I was fading, that I was too old to remember. They didn't know memory is a weapon when you've got nothing else left to lose. They thought I was losing my mind. But the truth was simpler than that. I had never seen more clearly in my entire life. I never liked hospitals, but lying still makes memories walk in like uninvited guests. Mine returned in fragments, the click of a typewriter, the smell of carbon paper, my boss calling me the best secretary in Memphis, 30 years, keeping others' secrets behind locked drawers. When Mark died, silence filled the house. Sunita was 16. I told her through rain and tears she'd never go hungry. I worked overtime, mended clothes, carried us both. When she married Jonathan, I thought it was God's reward, polite, gentle, bringing flowers, calling me Mom. For a while, he was everything I believed he'd be. Then, his job changed everything. The promotions came fast, the clothes got more expensive, the words got colder. He started wearing that heavy gold watch that clicked when he moved his hand, as if every tick reminded him of what he'd earned. One day he stopped calling me Mom. He started saying your mother instead. Your mother's here again. Your mother forgot her coat. Your mother should stay with her own friends. I had sold my house in Memphis to help them buy this one. I told myself it was an investment in family. I used to sit in the backyard watching them plant roses I had bought. Jonathan smiled at me then. You'll always have a place here, he said. Funny how people promise things they intend to destroy later. The first time I saw his real face was at dinner. I had made stew, his favorite, or so I thought. He took one bite, set the spoon down and said, I can't eat this. It smells like an old person's house. Sunita laughed not cruelly, but nervously, and I felt something small break inside my chest. From then on, I stopped cooking, unless they were out. I tried to warn her once, gently. Sunita, I said, be careful. He's changing. I see how he looks at you when you speak. She frowned, then smiled the way children do when they think their parents are being dramatic. Mom, you're being toxic again. You always need to control things. You can't stand that I'm happy. Toxic. The words stuck to me like tar. She said it again weeks later when I asked about the joint bank account that suddenly became just theirs. You don't understand modern marriage, she said. You're old-fashioned. Birthdays came and went without a call. One year, they gave me a box of instant coffee and a dish towel with the tag still on it. I pretended to like it and told them they shouldn't have. The next morning, I heard Jonathan in the kitchen whispering, She's lucky we bother at all. I became their ghost long before the subway tracks tried to finish the job. Still, I stayed. Old habits of love are hard to unlearn. I told myself he was under pressure, that Sunita was just caught in between. I folded their laundry, watered their plants, watched their daughter, my granddaughter, while they worked late. Little things, the kind that make you feel useful even when you aren't wanted. The day Sunita forgot my birthday completely, I baked my own cake. I lit one candle and sang quietly to myself. The next day, Jonathan saw the cake on the counter. Is that for us? He asked, already reaching for a slice. I said no. He shrugged and walked away. That was when the invitations stopped coming. Family dinners, holidays, somehow, they always forgot me. I found out about Thanksgiving from a neighbor's post. When I asked Sunita, she said, Mom, it's just easier this way. You make people uncomfortable. I remembered her small hand in mine, her head on my lap in church. Somewhere, I'd stopped being her world and become her shadow. Jonathan helped it happen. Your mother needs boundaries, he said, brick by brick. I trusted him because I trusted her. Love blinds. The signs were there, but I was too tired to see how invisible I'd already become. Sometimes I sat in the living room while they watched television, both of them scrolling on their phones. The glow from the screen lit their faces, but never reached me. I'd think, how did we get here? When did love turn into tolerance? Maybe that's why the fall didn't scare me as much as it should have. When someone pushes you after years of emotional shoving, the physical act just feels like punctuation. Lying in that hospital bed, remembering it all, I finally stopped asking why. There's no logic to betrayal. It's just a slow forgetting. I used to pray every night for my daughter's happiness. I still do, but not the same way. Now I pray she finds enough truth to see what she became before it's too late. I look at the family photo on my nightstand, the three of us at her wedding, smiles bright, eyes blind, and wonder if that woman beside her was really me. I once raised a child who loved me more than life itself. Now I look at the woman she's become and whisper to the empty room. I used to wonder what kind of daughter I'd raise. I never imagined it would be one who could stand beside the man who tried to kill me. I spent the first week at home pretending to heal, pretending to forget. My body was slow, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Every step Jonathan took, every whisper Sonata made behind closed doors, I recorded inside my head like I used to record court statements in the old days. I had done this work before, just under a different kind of cruelty. The first thing I did was call an old friend, James Cooper. We had met years ago when he was still a young detective tangled in an internal scandal. He'd been accused of mishandling evidence, and it was my testimony that saved him. I had found the missing file in an administrative drawer no one thought to check. Back then, he told me, "I owe you one, Mrs. Davis." I hadn't expected to collect on that debt, but life has a dark sense of humor. I called him from a payphone at the grocery store, not from the house. "James," I said, keeping my voice steady, "it's Jasmine. I need a favor." There was a pause, then a low whistle. 15 years, and you're still rescuing people. What kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind that walks around smiling in my kitchen." He didn't need more explanation. He promised to come by quietly the next evening. That night, I sat in my bedroom, the door locked, my old briefcase open on the bed. Inside were my papers, birth certificates, insurance statements, Mark's will. I had always kept copies of everything. Working with lawyers for 3 decades teaches you one rule: never trust anyone with your originals. I began sorting them, reading every line with the precision of an archivist. Halfway through, I found it the deed to the house. My name still sat neatly beside Mark's, untouched. Jonathan had talked for years about transferring ownership for tax purposes, but he had never finished the process. The papers he made me sign months ago weren't deeds at all. They were life insurance forms. My heart didn't race. It simply steadied. When James arrived, he looked older, heavier, but his eyes were still sharp. "You look good for a ghost," he said when I opened the door. "Some ghosts still have unfinished business," I replied. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Jonathan had once told me I was gum under a shoe. I poured coffee, though neither of us drank much. I told him everything, from the push to the lies at the hospital. He listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. "You think he's planning something else?" he asked. "I think he's not done until I am," I said. "He's got a policy in his name that pays out when I die. He needs me gone." James leaned back. "I can check that. I still have friends in the department and in insurance. As for the subway, I can't reopen the case officially, but I can look at the system logs. Cameras there are digital. Someone would have had to delete the footage manually." "He said his friend works in maintenance," I said quietly. That's how he knew the camera wasn't working. James nodded slowly. "Then, that's where we start." Over the next few days, he worked quietly, while I played the frail grandmother. Jonathan went to work as usual. Sonita busied herself online shopping. They believed my silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant observation. I began keeping a notebook small, leather-bound, hidden behind the kitchen drawers. Every detail went in. The time Jonathan left for work, the phone calls, the tone of his voice when he thought no one was listening. He grew careless. Abusers always do when they think the war is won. "Did you take your pills today?" he'd ask mockingly, tapping his temple. "Don't want you getting confused again." Each taunt went into my notes. The brand of wine he drank every night, the way Sonita flinched when he raised his voice, even the pattern of lights he left on in his office. A complete diary of a man who believed himself untouchable. James called a week later. "You were right," he said. "Camera logs from that day show manual deletion between 9 and 10 in the morning, the same window you were at the station. And guess who was signed into the security system? One of Jonathan's clients at his firm. I've got screenshots." I thanked him, my voice calm. He asked, "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet. I want him to feel safe first." After we hung up, I went to my closet and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside were the small tools of my new trade: A mini camera disguised as a pen, a voice recorder no bigger than a keychain, and a thumb drive. Technology had changed since my secretarial days, but I learned quickly. Revenge requires continuing education. That evening, while Sunita was upstairs, I placed the pen camera on the shelf, facing the living room. It looked like decor, nothing more. The recorder I slipped under the couch cushion, where Jonathan liked to sprawl while bragging on the phone. Over the next week, I gathered material, snippets of him yelling at Sunita, boasting about financial moves. One call where he said, "Once the old lady's gone, the house is mine." I replayed that line 3 times. It didn't make me angry, it made me efficient. James came by again, this time bringing a small envelope. Inside were copies of the insurance documents. "He forged your signature here," he said, pointing at the page. "This is fraud. You could bury him legally." "Not yet," I said. "I want to bury him morally first." He gave me a long look. "You always were a patient woman." "Patience is just anger with discipline," I said. Sunita started noticing small changes in me. I moved slower, spoke softer, smiled more. She thought it was recovery. It was reconnaissance. Every gentle word I gave her was a rope, and I was watching which way she'd pull. At night, I would sit in the dark and listen to the recordings. His voice filled the room like static. Each insult, each cruel joke about my age or memory became a thread in the net I was weaving. One night, as he passed my room, I heard him murmur under his breath, "Should have pushed harder." The camera pen caught the sound perfectly. I wrote in my journal that night, "He's not a husband. He's an accident waiting for a witness." 2 weeks later, James confirmed the rest. The insurance payout was set for $1 million. He listed you as deceased in a draft form dated 3 months ago. The man's sloppy. "I'll use that sloppiness," I told him. He gave me everything I need. I began copying all the files to my thumb drive, labeling them carefully. I even printed transcripts of the recordings, time-stamped, signed with my initials. The old secretary in me couldn't resist. The house grew quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence before a storm knows its name. Sunita still looked away from me, but her voice had softened. "You're doing better, Mom," she said one night. "Jonathan said we might go on vacation soon. Would you like to come?" I smiled. "No, dear, I think I'll stay and tend the house. It still feels like mine." She laughed softly. "You always say that." And I always meant it. That night, I looked at the glowing red light of the hidden recorder and whispered to myself, "You wanted a ghost, Jonathan. Now you live with one." The next morning, James texted me, "Got everything. Keep quiet. Let me know when you're ready." I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off the phone. The morning sun slipped through the blinds, painting stripes across the kitchen table. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote the final line of the page. "I don't need a gun. I have evidence. And I have time." Late one night, the house was still, the clock ticking like footsteps. I'd left the camera running for weeks, waiting for truth to reveal itself. That night, I watched. The blue light blinked as Jonathan appeared on screen. He slipped into my dark room, rifling through my drawers, muttering, "Soon, old lady, soon this will all be mine." His hand rested on Mark's will before he left, closing the door softly. I watched in silence, my breath trapped. Later footage showed him pacing, sneering into his phone. "When the old hag dies, I'll finally be free." I let his voice loop until it lost shape. The next morning, I searched his office and found it a blood-stained subway ticket in a plastic bag. Not evidence, a trophy. I didn't cry. I took a photo. Snakes expose themselves when you let them hiss. That evening, I called James. "I have something you should see," I said. He came the next day, his face pale as I showed him the footage and the photos. "Jesus, Jasmine," he muttered, rubbing his jaw. "You've got him. He's finished." "Not yet," I said. "I want Sunita to see what kind of man she married before the world does." He hesitated. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I played their game for years. This time it's mine." We copied everything onto 2 drives. One stayed with him, one with me. He promised to keep the originals locked in his office. When you're ready, he said, we'll go to the police. But I need you to stay calm. Calm was all I had left. The next few days, I went through the motions of normal life. I made breakfast, folded laundry, watched television I didn't care about. Jonathan tried to test me, pushing small boundaries, leaving my pills on the counter with the wrong labels, turning off the heater when I wasn't looking. He wanted me to snap, to show weakness. Instead, I smiled, thanked him, and wrote every act down in my notebook. Sunita began to notice things. She caught me staring at her once, too long. "Mom, are you all right?" she asked, nervous. "Of course, dear," I said, smiling. "I'm just thinking how much you look like your father." That night, she came into my room with tea. "Jonathan says you've been acting strange. Should we get you checked again?" "Strange?" I repeated. I suppose surviving what I did might make anyone a little strange. She didn't reply. When she left, I could hear them whispering downstairs. Her voice was thin and tired. "She's different, John. What if she remembers?" That was the first time I heard doubt in her voice, a small crack in the wall he built around her. He snapped. "She remembers nothing, and even if she does, who would believe her?" The recorder under the couch caught every word. By the end of the week, the pattern was clear. He was unraveling. His arrogance was leaking fear. He started locking his office door, hiding his phone when I entered the room. He even searched my drawers one afternoon, pretending to tidy up. I let him. The more he searched, the more he revealed. One afternoon, I placed a new recorder in the kitchen and went to my room. Through the cracked door, I heard him on the phone again. "No, the insurance can't wait," he said, voice sharp. "I told you, the signature's already there. She won't last much longer." I didn't need to hear more. That evening, I gathered everything, the recordings, the video, the photo of the bloody ticket, the diary of his abuse, and placed them in an envelope. I wrote a note on top for James. "In case something happens before I call." When he picked it up, he didn't say much. He only looked at me with that quiet respect reserved for people who've walked through fire and didn't burn. I kept acting normal. I baked cookies, trimmed the roses. Sonita grew restless, fidgeting with her wedding ring, glancing at me like she was afraid of what she might see reflected there. Once she asked, "Mom, do you ever think people change?" "All the time," I said. "Sometimes they rot slowly. That's still change." The next morning, Jonathan sat in his car, gripping the wheel, his face twitching like a man realizing his kingdom was paper. I knew the evidence was safe, and James would act soon. Words once harmless now lived as proof and confession. Every cruel syllable sealed with his name. I listened to the recordings one last time before locking them away. His voice filled the room. "When the old hag dies, I'll finally be free." I turned off the player, looked at my reflection in the dark screen, and whispered, "No, Jonathan, freedom is mine." Each word he had spoken was a nail, each recording a hammer, and I had plenty of both. Every monster builds his own coffin. I just helped him finish it. Each thing he said, each act he committed, now sat waiting for daylight. Every word, every lie, every laugh, another fingernail scraping across his own grave. I woke up that morning knowing the tide had turned. James had called the night before, his voice calm but tight. "It's done," he said. "The police have the files. I asked them to keep it sealed until they're ready to move. You stay quiet and keep acting." Quiet was easy. Pretending was an art I'd perfected. I started the day with coffee, slow and deliberate, letting the house feel normal. Sonita was in the garden, watering plants that were already dead. Jonathan was upstairs talking on his phone, pacing hard enough to make the floor creak. He was losing control of the image he built, and the cracks were beginning to show. Around noon, I called out, "Jonathan, could you come down for a moment?" My voice sounded almost tender. He appeared, jaw tight, phone still in his hand. "What now?" "I've been thinking," I said, eyes down. "About the future. About my will." That got his attention. He lowered the phone. "Your will?" "Yes," I said softly. "You've done so much for me. I think it's time to make things simpler for everyone. I'd like to rewrite it. Maybe have you help me." I watched greed flicker across his face like lightning. He tried to hide it, but I saw the quick calculation in his eyes. "That's smart," he said, stepping closer. "Do you want me to call my lawyer?" "No need. I've already written a draft. I just want you to look it over first." He smiled. "Of course, Mom. Anything you need." I turned and walked toward my bedroom, where a folder sat neatly on the desk. Inside wasn't a will, it was blank paper. Hidden in the corner of the room, under the lamp, was a new voice recorder blinking red. I sat down, motioning for him to join me. "I'm not as sharp as I used to be," I said. "Maybe you can help me remember what should go where." He laughed softly. "You don't need to worry about that. I'll handle the details. You just sign." I let him talk. He began dictating what should go in the will, speaking too fast, revealing too much. "The house, the accounts, even the pension," he said. "All should transfer directly to Sunita and me. It's better for taxes. You don't want outsiders touching your things, right?" I nodded, pretending to be confused. "But what about that policy you took, the one with my name?" He froze, then smiled. "That's different. Just insurance in case. You don't need to worry about it." His hand rested on my shoulder. "You trust me, don't you?" I looked at the recorder's faint red light and said quietly, "With my life." He didn't catch the edge in my tone. He leaned in closer, whispering, "This way, we can all move on. You've lived a long life, Jasmine. Maybe it's time to rest." His words sounded gentle, but beneath them was the same venom from the platform. Just die already. When he left, I waited, then retrieved the recorder. His voice was clear, damning. I sent the file to James marked urgent. By evening, police confirmed the evidence, his confession, forged insurance, deleted footage. They'd move quietly. That night, dinner was tense. Sonata avoided my eyes. Jonathan fidgeted, stabbing his food, unaware his own words were already waiting to destroy him. Finally, he snapped, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing," I said. "Just wondering how a man like you sleeps at night." He slammed his fork down. "I sleep fine." "Not for long," I murmured. The next morning, the police came. 2 detectives in plain clothes, badges flashed. They knocked first, polite, professional. Jonathan opened the door, still in his shirt sleeves. "Can I help you?" "Jonathan Reed?" "Yes." "You need to come with us, sir. You're being detained for questioning regarding an attempted homicide and insurance fraud." For a second he laughed. Actually laughed. "This is ridiculous. Who said that? Her?" He pointed at me, eyes wild. "She's crazy. She fell. I saved her." The older detective spoke evenly. "We have recorded evidence to the contrary. Please cooperate." He turned to Sunita, his voice cracking. "Say something. Tell them." She stood frozen, lips trembling. She looked at me, then back at him. "Jonathan, what did you do?" He lost control then. "You think she's innocent?" he shouted. "She's been manipulating us for years. I should have pushed you harder." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. The younger detective stepped forward, snapping the cuffs around his wrists. He kept shouting, struggling as they led him out. Sunita followed them to the doorway, her voice small. "Jonathan, stop, please." When the car pulled away, she turned to me, tears streaking her face. "Mom, tell me this isn't true." I met her eyes. Truth doesn't ask for permission. She sank to the floor, sobbing. "I didn't know. I didn't know." I walked to her slowly, each step deliberate. "No, you didn't want to know. That's different." I crouched down beside her, the years of motherly instinct and bitterness colliding in my chest. "You keep saying you lost your husband," I said softly. "But I lost my daughter long before that." She shook her head, whispering, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "None of us ever do," I said. "But intentions don't erase consequences." When the police car disappeared from view, the house felt hollow, stripped of the poison that had filled it for years. I could still hear his voice echoing in the silence. "I should have pushed you harder." That night, I sat alone in the living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I picked up my old notebook, flipping through the pages filled with dates, times, and words. Each line was a brick in the wall that had brought him down. James called to confirm. They booked him on both charges. He'll be held without bail. It's over. Over. Nothing truly ends for people like me. Moonlight stretched across the empty yard. Sonita stayed upstairs. I stayed below. Justice didn't roar, it whispered. Not thunder, but the quiet click of handcuffs closing on a man who thought he was untouchable, and the long, clean silence that finally followed. And in that silence, I whispered to the dark. The handcuffs didn't ring like a gunshot, but they hurt him more. The trial moved quickly. Jonathan's lawyer pleaded stress and confusion, but the evidence crushed him. The recordings, forged papers, deleted footage. I sat in the back, silent, watching him shrink under truth. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, he didn't look at me. 18 years without parole. The headline spread. Bank executive convicted for attempted murder of mother-in-law. His accounts frozen, company ruined, name erased. Sonita's neighbors crossed the street. Everything he built folded like wet paper. I didn't gloat, but the air finally felt clean, like breathing freely after years underwater. Sonita came to see me a few days after sentencing. Her eyes were hollow, makeup smudged. They froze all our accounts, she said. The mortgage, the car, everything's gone. I can't even pay the lawyer. I poured her tea. You'll survive, I said quietly. She looked up, anger flickering beneath her grief. Do you even care what this did to me? I set the cup down. It didn't do anything to you, Sonita. It showed you who you've been living with, who you've become. Her lip quivered. You could have warned me. I did, I said. You just didn't listen. She stood, pacing the small apartment. I lost everything. I met her eyes, steady and unblinking. No, you lost him. Everything else was never yours to begin with. For a moment she looked 16 again, the girl who once clung to me after her father's funeral. Then she left without a word. A week later, the bank's letter arrived. Foreclosure. Jonathan had stopped payments long ago, draining accounts to fund his defense. His name had been added to the mortgage years ago when I agreed to refinance. A mistake carved in ink. I packed my things and moved into a small apartment filled with sunlight and silence. Reporters wanted quotes. I gave none. Justice doesn't need applause. The bank sold the house. Sonita lost everything, even reputation. I sent my granddaughter a note. Tell the truth about what you saw. At night, I dreamed of the subway, calm, unafraid, letting the train pass. Survival, I realized, is simply refusing to disappear. James visited once, bringing fresh peaches. They're talking about writing a piece on you, he said. Human interest story. No, I said. Let the story be about him. Let them forget me. He smiled faintly. You sure about that? Yes. I've had enough people remembering me for the wrong reasons. We talked for a while. He told me Jonathan's appeal had been denied, that he'd been moved to a medium-security prison upstate. He's trying to play the victim, James said. He always did, I replied. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the dusk settle over the city. I thought of Sonita, somewhere out there, struggling to rebuild a life from the ashes of her own silence. I didn't hate her anymore. I just didn't recognize her. The phone rang one night. It was her. Mom, she said quietly, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know how to live with what I let happen. Then don't live with it, I said. Learn from it. She cried softly, the sound barely reaching through the receiver. Do you hate me? I hesitated. No, I said at last. I'm just done saving you. When we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the quiet. Grandma, true stories. I didn't celebrate. Existing was victory enough. Revenge isn't violence, it's subtraction, removing every lie a monster stands on until he falls by his own weight. The city moved on. Jonathan woke to numbers, not a name. I never pushed him. I simply let go of hands that never held me. Mornings in my new apartment are quiet, no footsteps, no shouting, just sunlight through thin curtains and the soft hum of distant traffic. I make strong coffee, my small ritual of survival. On the wall hangs one photo, Mark, young Sonita, and me. It no longer hurts. It simply reminds me goodness once lived here. Life is simple now, morning walks, bread, peaches, small talk with Lila at the market. Months after the trial, James called. A podcast, Voices from the South, wanted my story. I nearly refused, but silence had already saved and punished me. Maybe it could teach others. I agreed, no names, no pity, just truth. I said, start at the push. For the first time, I spoke the whole story without breaking it into fragments. I told it slow, not for drama, but for clarity. Every word was a weight I'd carried for years, finally being set down. I didn't cry. The tears had dried long before the train ever stopped that day. When it aired, it spread faster than I expected. Listeners wrote letters, strangers who said the story gave them courage to leave abusive homes, to speak out, to stop apologizing for surviving. Some called it the Tennessee Widow's Tale. I didn't mind the name. My name didn't matter. What mattered was that my voice, once dismissed as old and soft, had become a mirror where others could see themselves. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. No return address, just my name, in careful handwriting I recognized instantly. I opened it at the table, heart steady. Dear Grandma, I know I don't deserve to call you that, but I miss you. Mom says we can't see you right now, but I don't agree. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I saw your story online. I think you're brave. I think I want to be brave like you. Could we meet someday? Maybe at the park near the station you used to take me there. It was signed simply, Love, Lily. I sat for a long time staring at the letter, tracing the careful loops of her handwriting. The station, the same one where the world had once ended for me. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into my purse. The next Sunday, I took the train. I hadn't been back since that day. The moment I stepped onto the platform, the sound hit me first, the metallic echo, the hiss of brakes, the murmur of people. Nothing had changed, not even the smell of oil and dust, but I had. I stood at the edge, not too close, watching the rails hum with passing current. The ghosts didn't whisper. They didn't need to. I whispered to them, "This is where you tried to bury me, Jonathan," I said quietly. "But this is where I was born again." I sat on the same bench, the same cold metal, and watched the trains come and go. A few people glanced at me, probably wondering why an old woman was smiling at the tracks. I didn't care. I thought of Lily, of her letter, of how cycles break only when someone chooses to stop turning the wheel. When the next train arrived, I rose and stepped toward the escalator. The last time I had been here, I'd fallen down into darkness. This time, I climbed upward into light. Each step hummed beneath my feet. The sound of the crowd grew softer, replaced by the rhythm of my heartbeat. I reached the top, breathing slow, steady. The sunlight hit my face, warm and alive. I didn't turn back. On the ride home, I looked out the window as the city blurred past. Somewhere behind me was a man in a cell counting years instead of hours. Somewhere ahead of me was a girl who still believed in forgiveness. I wasn't sure which direction mattered more. When I reached my apartment, I placed Lily's letter beside the photograph of Mark and Sunita. 3 generations, side by side. A beginning, a betrayal, and maybe, one day, redemption. That night I listened to the podcast again. My voice sounded strange, older than I imagined but stronger too. When the closing music played, the host said, "Justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers." I turned off the radio, smiled, and whispered to the quiet room, "Sometimes it just waits." Before bed, I opened the window. The night air carried the hum of distant trains, no warning, just survival's echo. I once thought justice meant punishment, but it's rising from where they tried to bury you, returning to pain and feeling untouchable. I lit a candle, watching its reflection, not a victim, but a woman reborn. Revenge isn't sweet, it's silent. It breathes, waits, and lets the guilty destroy themselves with their own words. Jonathan killed the woman I was. I killed him with memory. Justice isn't noise, it's silence that forces the guilty to finally hear themselves. If you've stayed with me through every word of this story, through the silence, the fall, and the rise, thank you. Stories like this aren't about vengeance. They're about remembering that even in the darkest corners of family, truth still finds a way to breathe. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear that justice can whisper and still be heard. And if you'd like to keep walking beside me through the lives I've lived, through the secrets I've carried, and the truths I've finally told, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. There are more stories waiting on this porch of mine, quiet ones, dangerous ones, the kind that remind us that time may be slow, but it never forgets. So stay a while, pour yourself a cup of tea, and remember, wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers.